Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this very exciting panel co-presented by Folk Alliance International and Global Toronto, and featuring five fabulous panelists. I'm counting six because I see myself, but I will not be a panelist here today. It's called Facing Forward, Centering Disability Across the Music Industry. My pronouns are she and her. My name is Tressa Levasseur. I live on the traditional and ongoingly stewarded territory of the Haudenosaunee people in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And I am wearing raspberry colored glasses and a teal shirt and some homemade earrings with some local wood in them. Before we really get started in earnest, let's all take a moment together to take a breath, if we can. And as we share this breath, let's acknowledge that we're breathing, each of us, the air of a very specific place. Land acknowledgements are very difficult in this time of gathering internationally and virtually. But let us, in this breathtaking, remember that we share a responsibility to make good of this time that we have together and to do right by the traditional peoples of the territories upon which we reside, wherever they may be across this great globe. If you have any access needs for today's conversation, Christine will talk about that a little bit further when I introduce the panelists as well. But you're welcome to drop them in the chat on the platform. There will be breakout sessions after this panel. And now it is my very great honor and pleasure to introduce our panelists. I'll introduce everyone very briefly, and then I'll hand it over to our moderator. Today, joining us, Lachi, an award-nominated recording artist, songwriter, author, model, and diversity inclusion advocate based in New York City. Sylvi MacCormac is a composer and a musician living in Coast Salish Territory, British Columbia, and is the creator of Real Soundscapes, Voices of People with Disabilities at the Vancouver Adapted Music Society. Tabby is a singer-songwriter and disability advocate living and working also in New York City, which I believe is the ancestral territory of the Lenape people. And among her many accomplishments has founded the employee resource group Enable at New York Life. April Hubbard is a director, producer, arts administrator, and accessibility advisor, the chair of the Halifax Fringe Festival in Mi'kma'ki territory, and the co-founder of Disability X Halifax. Is everyone so impressed? Because I know I am. And finally, it's my delight to hand it over to our intrepid moderator, Christine Bruno of Bruno Disability Inclusion, a member of the Actors Studio who works nationally and internationally as an actor, director, teaching artist, and disability inclusion consultant for the entertainment industry. Take it away, Christine.
Thank you, Tressa. Hi, everyone. I am Christine Bruno, and I'm thrilled to be here today. And I'm so excited to be spending time with these fabulous artists and talking about a much needed subject that is very near and dear to all of us on this panel, I am sure. And if you're listening, probably near and dear to your heart as well. And if not, hopefully it will be near and dear to your heart after this panel and after the breakout session. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Christine Bruno, as I said. I am a white cisgendered woman with a mobility disability. I have short brown hair. I'm wearing glasses. I have my AirPods in my ear. I'm wearing a short sleeve black shrift. I am sitting in my living room, which is right now a blurred Zoom background with a big orange wall on a blue bench. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And my land acknowledgement is, as Tressa said, I am coming to you from the Upper West Side of Manhattan, New York City, USA, the stolen land of the Lenape people. And I'm going to introduce something. My access needs are being met today. And for the purposes of this conversation, an access need, I define an access need as anything that you need to be fully present for our conversation today, to fully participate in that conversation. And that could be anything from a glass of water, to a sign language interpreter, to shutting off your camera to avoid eye strain. So whatever you need, we want to invite you to do whatever you need to do so that you can feel fully present to participate in today's conversation. So the way that I'm going to, for time's sake, since we have one precious hour, I'm going to jump in with the questions, and then as the questions are being answered, the first time one of our panelists chooses to speak, I would like you all to introduce yourselves in the way that I have introduced myself, which is your name, your pronouns, your visual description, your land acknowledgement, and any access needs that you might have. I'm also going to ask that anytime you speak, if you could please start by saying your name. That would be super helpful. So let's just dive in. Okay, so our first topic is artist as advocate and activist, right? So I'm going to ask each of you to briefly discuss your trajectory as an artist. How did you come to be an artist in your artistic practice? And I'm going to start with, I'll start with Lachi. So take it away, Lachi. Oh, you're muted. Great.
Okay, hi. Lachi, really excited to be here. I am a brown-skinned Black woman with long black wavy hair, and I'm wearing a tan shirt with some designs. I'm here from New York City in the what is now known as the United States of the stolen Native American lands. And I am a recording artist, singer-songwriter, producer, and of course, disability advocate as it pertains to music and entertainment. And the field of music that I currently am in is electronic dance music and sort of a mixture of house and pop and sort of radio commercial music. And music was always part of my life at a very young age. And I think that my disability had a lot to do with it. Because I was struggling as a blind woman to make friends, I spent a lot of my time alone harnessing my gifts and my talents, writing songs, writing music. And that eventually grew into a passion. And when I would begin to share it with others, I would get positive reinforcement that I was unable to get socially. So music became sort of like my whole thing, it grew me out of my shell, and it grew me as a person and as a human being. And frankly, it's music and the success I found in it that gave me the strength to step forward in my disability and say, hey, you know what? I have a disability. While it made me shy when I was younger, it harnessed my love for music. Music made me unshy. And so we're full circle back to, hey, I want to talk about my disability now. And I want to be able to have an impact on the new and next young generation that may have been going through what I went through. And so while working in the music industry in that particular sector was rough because people aren't it's just not something you really talk about when you want to talk about disability. It's like, am I not going to be hip? Am I not going to be cool? You know, will some of these sort of A-list producers and major labels that I'm talking to and dealing with start acting like they don't know who I am, or will they start feeling sorry and weird? Luckily for me, that wasn't too much of the case. But I know that that's not true for everyone. So that's why I'm out here trying to get some visibility on disability and some pride in the identity of considering oneself disabled, especially in the entertainment industry.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Lachi, for that really full-throated answer, because you just basically answered sort of the first three questions in this bucket. So I'm gonna go now to Sylvi and sort of do that. I'll just read those questions and you can answer as a bucket, because I think they are all linked. So again, it was briefly discussed your trajectory as an artist, and then when and how did advocacy enter the picture for you, and how are your art and activism linked?
Okay, I am Sylvi MacCormac. You can call me a girl named Elvis. And what am I wearing? I'm wearing a beautiful First Nation a drawing of a sun with red and yellow on a gray t-shirt. It's hand done in Vancouver here. And I'm wearing a black hat with a raven inside a moon, another First Nation beautiful artwork. So I'll begin, and I actually wrote down what I was going to say, so I'm not blah blahing too much.
No
so yeah, okay, so this is my story about my art and activism. My father took the train from Ireland, and my mother flew to New York with 3 babes in 1956. My sister and I were born here in Coast Salish Territory, BC, Canada, raised by a single working mother in the 60s and 80s in Kitsilano and West End, Vancouver. I was born and bred on social democracy. Think of bread and roses. I was given a guitar and began creating and performing original folk rock songs in the 80s and working as a musician and doing physical clowning in a community marching bands, stilt walking, juggling, mask making. I'd call out drum roll, please, and I'd rolled over the big bass drum. I often say in jest, I was disabled in vaudeville. As a young picture framer, I was introduced to First Nations art while working with Canadian Fine Arts. I knew with multiple sclerosis, I'd lose the ability to play guitar, which led me to becoming a soundscape composer with its emphasis on acoustic ecology, which led me to writing. Soundscape composition is the folk music of electroacoustics. Wheel Voices with the voices of people with disabilities was inspired by Peggy Seeger, Ewan McCall, and Charles Parker of the BBC, who in the radio ballads worked with the voices of miners and people with polio. Peggy was the daughter of Peter, Paul, and Mary. Pete Siegel is the logo of the Vancouver Folk Music Festival, where my composition, Festival Quartet was for Solitude, was included in the VFM map at Home 2020, sadly, because the festival was canceled due to COVID. My grandmother sang in the Abbey and Gaiety theaters in Dublin, Ireland, with the family secret being that my great-great-grandfather was a boxer from Jamaica. My mom said Oprah Winfrey's eyes often reminded her of mom's eyes. Her parents, Francesca and Harold Robinson, were afraid she'd run into sex, drugs, and rock and roll if she had accepted the offer to sing opera in Europe. And as Hunter S. Thompson says, the music business is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hall where thieves and pimps run free and good men or women die like dogs. There's also a negative side. Always loving the music of First Nations and being aware of the reality of colonialism, the Irish Troubles in 1916, et cetera, my awareness became acute when I was invited to participate in a cross-cultural, nonviolent public art and activism project called Utsam Witness Project. Utsam is a traditional Squamish ceremony. I learned I was swimming from Chief Bill Williams. I learned I was swimming in the waters. Sorry, somebody's banging at the door, so it's distracting me. I learned I was swimming in the waters of Kitsilano, where my Indigenous friends' grandparents were forcibly removed from their homes in the 1900s. Here, I acknowledge my Filipina Ate sisters and brothers, whom I've come to know as my community health workers, who, like my parents, were immigrants. Just last week, a man asked me if I was Indian, and I said, I'm Irish. And he said, that's just as bad. My art and activism is an ongoing process. It comes from my love of people, community, and my sadness seeing their struggle.
Thank you so much for that, Sylvie, and for that piece of artwork. That was beautiful. Thank you. Tabby, I'm gonna go to you and then April.
Oh, it's so hard to follow up on that. I'm Tabby, also known as Tabitha Haly, and I have a physical disability. I'm in a power wheelchair. I have dark brown hair in a ponytail right now, wearing a yellow dress and glasses. I am a she, her, and singing has been a part of my life since I can remember. I grew up in a musical family. My dad plays guitar and piano, and we've always been seeing musicals that my mom read for us back in the day of VHS tapes, and just really, really love music. And I learned that's something I could do physically without needing anyone to set me up. I could just sing any room in the house. And it also helped me measure, like if I was sick, helped me realize, oh, do I feel like I can't breathe as deep? Do I need to cough and help let some air out? Maybe singing will help me open up instead of me getting constant chest therapy to help open up congestion. It helped me make life decisions. When I would be in the hospital, anytime the doctor asked me a very critical question, I would put singing in the mix and think, well, is that going to affect my singing? If it will, then we're not going that direction. And then, of course, it helped me with frustration sometimes if I couldn't go to a place because it was not accessible, or to someone's house. You know, being very young, it's hard to understand things like that. So I then turned to also writing songs. I learned that I had a knack for it, and that it would help me write songs for even other people. If I can write about my story, or write about how I like to think positively. I also write about hard times I've been through, how thankful I am for people who have helped me, my attitude about life, and things that I hope will change for the future to help bring more inclusion. So that's how my singing, writing, and advocacy all link together.
Great. Thank you so much, Tabby. And we'll round out this first part with April. Hi, April.
Hello, my name is April Hubbard. I use she, her pronouns. I have shoulder length brown hair. I'm a light-skinned white woman with long angular features. I'm wearing light tortoiseshell glasses, earrings that are made out of Barbie legs, and a burgundy button-down shirt. I am currently in Mi'kma'ki, which Shubuktuk is where I'm located, and colonially that's known as Halifax, Nova Scotia. I don't have any access needs to speak of online today. Most of my access needs come in physical spaces, as I'm a manual wheelchair user. So I started out pretty early on in the theater as an actor, and I started taking voice lessons to help with the stage voice. And then at the age of 16, although my whole life I've had invisible disabilities, it was discovered that I had spinal cord tumors at the age of 16, and my life changed drastically as I entered the world of disability in a way that I could no longer hide. So I went from being a very active actor to overnight having no space for me to be on stage and nobody willing to give me a chance. So as I entered my early 20s, I started really missing being on stage and being in the arts. So I decided that I had to find a way to still be close to it and be involved in some way. So I started volunteering in whatever way they would take me, in whatever space I could get into with my wheelchair. And some days that was selling tickets, and some days it was being an usher, and some days it was writing grants from my bed because I couldn't even get out of my own home. And eventually, after many, many years of just hanging around and being in spaces, People started to notice me and ask if I would be more involved in arts administration. And after 17 years of volunteering with the Halifax Fringe, I was asked to become their chair. And then once I started to kind of have a name here in Halifax as an artist with a disability, or as an arts administrator with a disability, I started deciding that I had to create spaces that didn't exist for other people. So that's why I created Disability X Halifax, which is a disability storytelling event here in Halifax. And then I was lucky enough a few years ago to have a great opportunity to take up adaptive circus. And I finally found a way to make my way back onto stage and actually have a space for myself to tell my story. So I really focus in all of my art on stage as a way to open up and show examples of people with visibly disabled bodies being out there and seeing how I move in my wheelchair and seeing what I can still accomplish, but also telling some really difficult parts of my story that most people usually don't hear. I speak a lot about medical trauma and just a lot of challenges I face as an artist with a disability in my art. So to me, my art and my advocacy aren't really able to be separated. Every time I am in public, my body is seen as invalid. And by saying I'm going to be out there and be seen as an artist and make art regardless, that is a political statement. And to me, that is how I accomplish my advocacy through art.
That's great. That leads us perfectly into my next question, which a lot of us have been asking, a lot of us by disabled artists have been asking ourselves, especially during the pandemic. Those of us who do wear multiple hats, as we all do, which is why we're here today, right? And we have the expertise to speak in this way and in this platform for this conversation, is what we've sort of talked about the first one a little bit, just by the nature of like how our artistry brought us to our activism and that lived experience of disability. And so I kind of want to stress put the stress on the second part of this question. The question is, what if any are the costs that you have found to wearing multiple hats in terms of the need to be artists and activists? Because our art and our activism, like April just so beautifully articulated, it seems like for all of you, it's inextricably linked, sort of, and I say very much what April said when I'm talking about my own artistic practice. It took me quite a while to realize that my body, the realization that my body in public on a stage as an actor is sorry, my AirPod just fell out. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. That my body is a political statement, whether I want it to be or not, right? And in every space that I'm in, I feel the need and I'm being asked to educate others in the non-disabled community about disability, about how to work with disabled artists. And so I wonder if any of you have given thought of that or experienced that, and just what your experiences are with that. And along with that, like, what are some of the benefits that you have seen by the fact that your art and your activism is linked? And any one of you can, I won't call on you, whoever just wants to answer can just jump in.
I agree, Christine. Like I think a lot of the hat wearing is all in addition, by the way, to what an artist has in general. Wearing many hats nowadays as a musician is also promoting yourself, managing your bookings, managing all of the administration, and selling yourself. So on top of this, we have additional hats, which include balancing the education, the awareness, while also going through our emotions and making sure that we stand up for ourselves. So you know, I always have to think about how I have to speak up or it's right, but also work in collaboration. I have to realize that I do not want to get too upset sometimes and take a deep breath like we did at the beginning of this, because I am representing not just me, but I'm representing other people maybe who are going on stage in a wheelchair or performing with the band and asking for a way to get on the stage. So, you know, it's fighting two things at the same time and trying to be positive, and then also managing my band. So I also do have a band, but in my personal life, I also have home health aides 24/7. So it's like, okay, I'm managing a lot of things and everyone's emotions, and everyone's doing it for me, and everyone's also physically helping me. So how can I be asking for too much? But then again, I know it's the right thing to do. And I just have to be very positive, happy, and know that the end goal is that I'm not just helping myself as a disabled artist, I'm hopefully helping another disabled artist who might be in the audience watching me. And I want to make sure that they're turned on to the fact that it's possible. And if for any reason they feel discouraged, they see that they're not alone. And we have a lot to help pioneer in terms of helping make things better.
Great, thanks so much, Tabby. I think Lachi, you were raising your hand. So
He's there.
you want to jump in?
Yeah, I keep forgetting.
Hey, you're not supposed to be here till 2, right?
Just
I'm on
one
conference
second,
call.
Lachi.
I'm
Sylvi,
sorry, you're gonna have to take a break, please. It's the wrong code in news. It's 1933.
Sylvi, thanks. Sorry, Lachi, Sylvi was not muted.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I believe that in some form or fashion, all forms of art is an expression of activism in some way or another, right? You have to tap into a piece of yourself, and a lot of times into your vulnerability, something different or unique about yourself, and say, I want to express this to the world. And usually, for the most part, when you tap into that part of yourself, you're accessing what is different about you and why you believe that's beautiful. And so that's what that inner expression of art is. And that in and of itself is a feat of activism. And so I say that the fact that we as people with disabilities are standing forward and standing in our truth, and also using our art to propel our message to a broader and wider audience, I think that that's only beneficial. There's no negative to that, because A, we're expressing ourselves, and we're doing that dual purpose of already being that teaching moment. So when I walk down the street, if I'm using my cane and someone comes up to me and starts barking all these questions, I don't necessarily feel like dealing with that as a teaching moment, right? There are some times where I want to teach because I feel that person will be receptive, but there are many times where I don't feel like teaching because I'm just tired or I've already taught enough. But through art, we're reaching a larger audience that we never probably would not have been able to hit without using the art vehicle to do so. And I think the other thing that I wanted to say is, as a female, as a Black person, especially in America, as soon as I step out of the house, I am teaching, because, you know, up until about, when was it? Just a couple of months ago, a year ago, a lot of Americans didn't even know that they were racist, right? Yeah. They just learned last year that they were racist. And the sad truth of it is that most Americans don't even know about the term ableist or ableism. And if you're going to sit here and be part of all of these movements, and you're just learning about racism last year, you haven't even learned about the term ableism either. I think that we should be actually excited to steer this conversation, that right now we are the pioneers teaching what ableism is and how it should be addressed and how it should be fixed. And I think it's an exciting moment. Yes, there have been a lot of folks before us saying a lot of things. There are the Judy Humans of the world. There are the people that came before us, right? But this moment right now, while the diversity, inclusion, equity is, that door is open, I love that we're trying to get that term accessibility as part of it. I think that we need to be louder right now and not let our heel get pushed out of the door before that door closes. I think now is the time, and I'm actually very excited about it. So long story short, I actually think that this is great. I think that it's all positive. I think that activism, using that art, using that platform, and using that pulpit to showcase disability and to use it as the ultimate teaching moment, now is the time, and I'm happy to see where we take this.
So that's amazing, because it's gonna allow me now to go to April and Sylvie, whichever one of you wants to address this next. But I'm gonna fold into that something that Lachi again has let me springboard to, is what's next. You know, we all talk about the term normal, and I'm using air quotes, right? Normal, because we know there's no such thing as normal. And the truth is, normal was not working for disabled folks before the pandemic, right? So I would love for April and Sylvie to answer the question about emotional labor and the expenditure of emotional labor and how you feel about that. Folded into a conversation about the pandemic. Has the pandemic affected you as a disabled artist or administrator in either positive or negative ways? And what changes have you seen during the pandemic that you hope will carry forward when we are completely able to go to, I don't even say back to normal, to reimagine when the world opens up again in a way that we're used to, being able to be in the same room together and share space and making art in the same room. And I know that this is interesting because 3 of you are actually in Canada, and I think you're in 2 of you are in Canada, and I think Lachi and Tabby and I are maybe in a little bit of a different space than you are right now in terms of the pandemic. So yeah, so I'm interested, particularly from the 2 of you, Sylvie and April, about how you feel about that, like what's happening now with the pandemic and what changes have happened. So whichever one of you, Sylvie, I see you've unmuted yourself, so why don't you start?
I was going to say, would April, would you like to go first? So I'm Sylvi MacCormac, and I do want to acknowledge that I'm white appearing, although can't tell. Some people think I might be Spanish or this or that, but my lived experience is as a white woman in growing up in a the English school system in BC, Canada, Vancouver. So my experience, it's a lived experience is as a white girl, right? So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and also to acknowledge that here we speak about disability, and as I'm on this important conference call, they didn't tell me my care was coming at 11 today instead of 2, and so she kept banging and knocking at the door, and I thought it was my friend, and then so I went to the door in a kind of a rush. So it's the stress of disability, you're trying to rush and your wheelchair dies, your battery dies, things happen. So what do I want to see going forward? I would love to see universal accessibility instead of just focusing on people with disabilities. So to allow all people to enter this space with canes, with baby hampers, big, strong person that is an invisible disability that has to, walk really slowly, I'd love to see Elon Musk and Grimes invent a wheelchair that floats like a bubble instead of this mechanical old jalopy, which is like an old Ford truck. You could have it in any color as long as it's black, right? It's like they only comes in one. Now they come in all these yellows and reds and blues, and I figure the red makes it go faster, but I've still got the reality of living with a disability, and I suppose humor and swimming, water is life, and water is healing, and I can be in water and be like a seal, you know, in water. I feel like I could swim from here to Vancouver Island. So what would I like to see? I would like to see universal accessibility in music spaces, in conferences, in homes, and to, you know, there's certain people who don't even, well, I've read an article about called disability as a colonialist construct. You know, some people don't see us as having a disability, but of people being people with barriers, or, and so that word dis comes from the Latin god of like dis, you know, this, and it's like, we are people first. And so I would love to see an industry that opens up widely to have all people, disabled people, people white, colored, many people of languages and colors and cultures, and sharing, because I think that will make us more strong, you know, a compassionate society that cares. We all have brothers and sisters who are struggling with things, you know, and so music is an industry, but it's also spirit and compassion and caring and sharing language and culture and foods. It's that cultural, I mean, it's a cultural industry, but it's also Alan Gray said something the other day in the genre conference about, he said community over genre, verbs over words, and action over just words. Yeah, so I feel that those are so important in the industry as a people, as a global people. Please, Lachi, I saw Lachi's, but April, you're going to speak, right?
I know, April, I know that you're about to go. I just wanted to ask a quick question. Do you all still say the word colored in Canada?
People of color, you know, they used to call my grandmother mulatto, which is an awful term, meaning, you know, so people of color, people with disabilities, all people.
Okay, I was just out of curiosity.
It depends on who you're speaking with then, right?
Yeah, I mean, that brings to, this is Christine speaking, that brings to Lachi points, like words matter, right?
Words do matter.
Words are very powerful, and they hold weight and agency or not, right? Do we define ourselves as people with disabilities, or do we define ourselves as disabled people? Some people prefer, like I define myself as a disabled person because I choose to center my disability in my identity as opposed to person with a disability. But everyone's preference is everyone's preference, right? So, but it does speak to Lachi's point, like words matter, and we, you know, we need to be especially cognizant of that.
Did I say
not
something?
only,
Sorry, did I say something that triggered you to?
You had mentioned, you were kind of saying a list, and you said white and then colored and then this. So I was just like, is that just a regular term? I didn't want to react until I knew if it was just a regular term or not.
No, I mean, I'm perceived as white, though I have, you know, ancestry of Spanish. My grandmother, you know, it's like the diaspora. So people of many colors, of
I think,
white, brown, red. So certainly I didn't mean to say.
No, it's totally all good. I mean, I think I just at the end of the day, I think words do matter, because another thing that was mentioned too, I think another thing that was mentioned too was dis, right? Like why a lot of people react negatively to the term dis, right? Like in terms of the prefix dis in disability. But But I personally think, and I'm going to toss it to you, April, I know that it's totally your turn, but just really quickly, I think that people should be proud of the suffix dis or the prefix dis, because it actually means to stand apart, right? To be separate and apart from. And I don't see that as saying, oh, well, I'm different and I'm not part of society. I see that as I'm different and I'm better. I'm able to say, hey, these are my talents, these are my skills, this is how I stand out. If I need to reach inside myself and bring something out within me, I have easy access to that because I stand apart. And I think standing apart is a good thing. Do you want to just be another like Cheerio in the bowl of cereal? Or do you want to be something different and stand out? So I am proud of the prefix dis, and I encourage everyone else to be too.
And that's why I choose to center my disability by referring to myself as a disabled person, because the word disability and disabled, I think that the community has taken back that word, much like the queer community. People refer to themselves as queer, that is a term of empowerment. So, but I do recognize and make space for those people who choose not to identify that way as well. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna bounce it to April.
April speaking here. Yeah, and to expand on what Lachi was just saying, disability brings so many awesome things. And one of the really great things in the arts, when you combine art and disability, is that folks with disabilities are forced to be so creative. We really have to think outside the box every day and every moment we do, everything that we do, because there is no formula. So I think during this pandemic, one thing that's really helped us is other folks are realizing now, able-bodied folks are realizing that we are innovators. We've been doing this already and trying to find a way, and really coming to us and asking our opinions and asking for us to help open doors for all the other groups. I'm a proud queer, disabled, Mi'kmaq, white, Acadian woman, all these prefixes that don't fit into the norm. Well, most don't fit into the norm, but I still have a lot of privilege as a fairly able-bodied, passing on most days, white woman. So I have to push even harder to open the door for all these other folks that are coming behind me that are still not accepted in the community. And there's still a long ways to go for all of us. I mean, I am the chair of the Halifax Fringe Festival now for almost 5 years. And there are still venues that folks choose as bring their own venues that I cannot access in my own festival. I, as the chair of the festival, can't attend those performances. So there's still a lot of people that just aren't thinking of accessibility or not thinking of it in the moment. I'm really lucky right now to be involved in a project with Eastern Front Theatre here in Halifax that is looking at all the barriers that folks face, not just in the disabled world, but in all performing arts in Nova Scotia. And I just wrapped up last week community consultations where we get to bring groups of folks together to have these conversations about what your experience is. And it was so amazing to see, and everybody left it saying, we need more of this, because we want to just sit down and have a space for these conversations about, okay, these are my challenges. What are your challenges? And how can I help you with your challenges? And it really brings us all forward and moves us in a great direction. The challenges I'm seeing with the pandemic is, although I've had more work than I could possibly take on from an accessibility consultation side, there's been no way for me to rehearse as an artist, especially as an artist with a compromised immune system. And the able-bodied world still isn't recognizing that. So we opened up here in Nova Scotia again yesterday for being able to gather indoors. And I've had several people reach out to me and say, okay, we want you to perform next week. And I haven't been rehearsing for 1.5 years now as a circus artist because I haven't been able to. And even though most folks can, they don't take into account that I, as somebody with a disability, may not be able to go into that space safely yet. So we need to sit down and really be open for these conversations and be open for doing things outside of the normal way that society has decided that we behave as artists. And it's not the normal rehearsal process anymore. It's not the normal festival programming process anymore. how about we sit down and talk to everybody about what the issues with that are and throw out the booklet and start again from square one. That's what I'm really excited to have happen now as we re-enter a new phase of normal, or whatever you want to call it, post-COVID.
That's great. Yeah, Christine, I'm shaking my head because we've all been talking about the quote unquote new normal or the reimagining, right? And bringing all of the good things that we have discovered in the pandemic to the table as we reimagine what it looks like, as we reimagine what the world looks like, how we make our art looks, you know, because obviously without Zoom, we would not be having this conversation, and we all would not have been brought together, which is, you know, an obvious good thing. So I'm going to move us to, we've got about 15 minutes left. I'm going to move us, and we've already started talking about this. So a natural progression, moving to Nothing Without Us, centering disability, right? And I want to talk a little bit about intersectionality in this section too, and what role intersectionality plays in your work, and in, you know, in your life. And some of you have already talked about it, so I just want to sprinkle that in there again. Sylvi had said in her last answer, she sort of answered this question: what, if anything, is the music industry doing well to support disabled artists, or what can the music industry be doing better in this time? And how would you like to see, what concrete change would you like to see the music industry do to center the lived experience, the intersectional lived experience of disability in the next, say, in the next year, in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years? Just whatever your thoughts are, because I know we all have lots of thoughts about what the industry could be doing better to support our artistry, support our activism, just support our visibility in the industry. And Lachi, you have raised your hand, so go ahead.
So this is Lachi, and I love this question, and I'm so pumped to answer it right now. And even though it was really like 8 or 9 questions in one, I feel that it is very difficult for someone to determine what they want to do or what they want to be if they don't see it back at them, even if it's on, whether it's on television, whether it's on the radio, or whether it's just in an article. For me to say, hey, I want to be a successful singer-songwriter and actress that's Black and female who's blind, but I haven't seen anyone do that before me, then how can I figure out what, you know, how can I make my vision board? How can I visualize it? Just a Black girl can put a picture of Beyonce or Alicia Keys on their vision board. You know, a white guy can put, I don't know, Elon, well, he's South African, but whatever. People have people that can put on their vision boards. And I had seen I thought to myself, who can I put on my vision board when I was 8 and I didn't know what the term vision board was, but you get my point. And I didn't have anyone that I could put. And so therein lies the problem, because it's not just we need more in entertainment, we also just need to see it in articles. So recently, the Annenberg, the University of South Carolina, USC, Southern California. The University of Southern California put out this massive study, and this just 2021, on the music industry. I suggest everybody go check it out. Basically, it went and it did a study on everyone from VP to C-level in the major aspects of the music industry, record labels, radio stations, this and that. And it broke it all down. It was like, oh, it turns out that only 18.8% of people in those VP up to C-level are from underrepresented groups, and only 8% of that is Black, which does not represent American. This is an American study. And that 33% or less are females, and well, 50% should be female if you want to accurately present it. So I'm reading this study and I'm going, oh, wow, these are some insane numbers. They're so low. We need to do better. And then I finally decide to Control F and look for disability, and it's nowhere near. And this is a very extensive study. So this is a failing. When we talk about diversity, why is disability not included in diversity? I need to see that. I want to see that in the articles that I read. I want to see that in the research that's being done. A positive to that. So I'm in the Recording Academy, the Grammys, and I do know that they're starting to ask when they're having people join, what their disability is. And they said that they hadn't done it up to this point because they were like, oh, we don't know if it's appropriate to ask. Well, that's a very medical model way of thinking. It's not my fault that I have a disability. It's society's fault that they have given me barriers. So I think that it's okay to ask someone about their disability if they're comfortable to disclose it, because it's about identity. The other thing that I also noted too as well is that the studies are just scant. The UK has done a study specifically on musicians with disabilities, talking about, 70% of musicians are willing to compromise their health in order to keep their disability disclosed when they try to do a gig. 1 in 5 musicians, this is in the UK, had to cancel a gig when they finally got there because they couldn't access it, which is super sad. But guess what? We don't know what those numbers are here in the US. So we can't go to Congress and say, hey, guess what? Because we don't have a major level study that has done that. That's one thing I need to start seeing, are major level studies on disability and music. Can we get that started? Yes, we're gonna have this, we have this big study at USC. Was disability included? No. How is inclusion uninclusive? I'm tired of that. And then number 2, we need to see more on screen. 2%, 3% now. It was 2% in 2017. It's 3% now in 2019 of roles are a person with a disability. But you know what the real sad fact is? Only 10% of them are authentically played. Are you kidding me?
Oh, not even 10.
Yeah, 25% of Americans, 62 million Americans have a disability, and only 10% are authentically played of the 3% roles that you give us in the first place. So to conclude, there is a lot of work to be done, especially in the mainstream industry. And that's the circles in which that I find myself in, being that I've been assigned to Sony and work in the Recording Academy. And I there is receptiveness, but it's just too slow. And I'm tired of people going, well, Lachi, you're the only one, when I know that there are so many talented musicians out there that are here to do that representation and to showcase that visibility.
Yeah, thank you, Lachi. This is Christine. That's great. And just to piggyback on that about the Annenberg study, is the Annenberg USC's been doing that study for the past 7 or 8 years.
I think it was like 5. Oh, okay. Right.
Not for musicians.
Okay.
For film and television.
Right.
And it took us a lot to get them to include disability. And the thing that I find really frustrating is that you would think that once you understand that disability is a part of diversity, why would you not continue that practice across the board in any study of any sector or industry that you are studying? That's what I find, is that everything is pretty siloed.
Yes.
And so I agree with you 100%. I see, Sylvi, you have unmuted yourself. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah.
We have 7 minutes.
I loved what Lachi was saying. And there's a fellow named Leroy Moore who invented the word trip hop. He's awesome, and I would recommend it. Anybody Google Leroy Moore. He's starting his a PhD. And also Matt Mack, M-A-T-T-M-A-C. He's a young indigenous DJ from Manitoba, Winnipeg, and he's awesome. I honor you all, but I wish they were here talking, and universal accessibility, I think, is an architectural thing. Of course, we need to include the diversity and disability. And we all have so many struggles, and it's so important for us to be involved in, like you're saying, accessibility, not only physically, but emotionally, that it's okay to have mental health issues. All of our cousins and families, 6 degrees of separation. There's so much relation between us all. And I just see the industry, can we be more compassionate as a music industry with emphasis on community, as well as cultural, whatever they call it. I'm sorry, I'm not always good with terms. I'll stop talking here, please, someone else.
And so I'd love to bring Tabby into the conversation. Just 1 second, Sylvi, because
I
Go ahead,
definitely
Debbie.
agree with all about everything that Lachi said, everything that Sylvi said, and something that April brought up at the beginning of this conversation about creativity. So, you know, as music lovers who love learning about new artists or different artists, artists who stand out. I mean, who always wins a new artist in the Grammys? It's someone who's new and brought something to the table that hasn't been brought before. I mean, that's what it should be, right? So
Yes.
don't people know that, especially music lovers or those who are sound engineers at a venue, that hey, this person, this disabled artist has dug so deep into something that I might not know about. And that is something I want to know about. So this might answer like another question about what can I do to help this artist and take the onus off of all of these hats they have to wear so that they can be the true artist in this performance or in this studio recording. You know, an example would be like during the pandemic, one of the challenges I faced was now my home health aide has to be my sound engineer, you know, set up my mic, you know, hit the loop pedal. Usually my band does that. And when we are on stage, that's something the sound engineer does. And there are different accommodations for someone like myself with a physical disability. So those are types of things I think should be seen as opportunities that can be sought because we are music lovers, we love creativity, and we want to hold on to every type of new piece of art that we recognize is out there, and that includes, and especially includes, those from people with disabilities.
Thanks, Tabby. That's great. And I don't personally, I don't think a lot of these things that we've learned during the pandemic and these quote unquote workarounds that we've had during the pandemic that benefit everyone are going away, right? So I think for disabled folks, it is a challenge. I know as an actor, it's a challenge for me, the whole, what you were describing, Tabby, about the setup, the need to do at-home setups, right? You have a home health aide, I live by myself, and I have a mobility disability. So the concept of doing a self-tape for auditions is a nightmare for me. And it's not going to go away because the non-disabled world has figured out that this is a lot more efficient for them, right? But then it falls on us as the disabled artist to then yet again have another thing that we have on our plate. And Lachi,
I was just going to say,
yourself.
You said it's a lot more efficient for them, but really it's just more accessible, right? They're benefiting from accessibility.
That's
and they
right.
don't even recognize
That's right. That's right. That's right. So we have 2 minutes. I would love for Tressa to usher us out, but I also wanted to invite April if you have any final thoughts. And remember, we're going to go to a breakout session so we can continue this conversation in the breakout session as well.
April speaking here. The only final thought I have is to challenge all of us to not only learn about our own disabilities, but all other disabilities as well. Because having all forms of access will help everyone. So that's
absolutely.
And to thought.
Thank you. Tressa, take it away.
Well, before we move into the breakout sessions, and we do hope that many of the viewers of today's session will join us over there for an interactive Q&A style, diving deeper into the second half of this fabulous agenda Christine put together that we have barely dug into. A huge thank you, miigwech, merci beaucoup, to April Hubbard, Tabitha Haly, Sylvi MacCormac, Lachi, and our amazing facilitator, Christine. Christine, amazing job.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to seeing you over at the other link shortly. Please bring your questions and thoughts, and we'll be I think all of the panelists will be invited to suggest a topic they'd like to dive a little deeper into, and then we may break into groups or we may stay all together, but we'll see you over there. Thank you also, Global Toronto, for a wonderful week of programming. It's Folk Alliance's great honor to collaborate with you on this.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me.
See you over there in a minute.